A prophet seeking prophet may no longer be in town. ZNS News tracking this story of a sneaky supposed savior.
A partner for BEC could soon be announced.
And primary school students go after a track and field crown. We've got the highlights. The Bahamas Tonight, the National Report, starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie renewed his commitment to the advancement of our parliamentary democracy. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Altavis Munnings.
And I'm Andrew Knowles. Thanks for joining us. The Prime Minister officially opened the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association's post-election seminar being held this week at the Atlantis Resort on Paradise Island.
The two-day event is a capacity-building event that serves to educate newly elected members of Parliament as well as appointed members of the Senate and a refresher course for returning parliamentarians.
Carla Palmer tells us more.
The overall goal of the conference is for parliamentarians to learn and promote the benchmarks of good governance. As one of the longest-sitting parliamentarians in the House of Assembly, with some 40 years under his belt, Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie knows firsthand the values of these types of seminars. He noted the need for the continued deepening of democracy for the good of the electorate.
I am hopeful, therefore, that this parliamentary seminar today will explore themes that will point us towards the myriad of ways in which we can foster a deeper sense of democracy. As for myself, I do not believe that parliaments and parliamentarians must always be adversarial. And this is where I again refer to the points made by the Leader of Opposition. There is a time for adversarial positions, but there is time for constructive and sound contributions to our public policy process. I think instead that parliaments ought to be a venue for the debate of substantive issues. Yes, I appreciate that it is the duty of the majority, the government of the day, to bring forward proposals and to enact legislation in support of policies. But this process should not result in the constant acrimony that we seem to be bring upon ourselves.
In addition to calling for a review of the rules of Parliament, Prime Minister Christie, the Member of Parliament for Centerville, is also lobbying for permanent committees to be formed in areas of critical importance to national development, like the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Trade, Education, Science and Technology, and Law and Justice.
Democracy is not a static concept or institution. It is a living organism. It grows through constant attention to the conditions and demands that are thrown up by our culture, society, and the political landscape. So while adhering to its basic tenets of democracy and the rule of law, we must constantly review and analyze where and how we are going, what we are doing. The most dangerous threat to maintaining a vibrant democracy is if we were to become stuck in the past.
Prime Minister Christie also wants our parliament to evolve to the point where parliamentarians engage in an exchange program with colleague parliamentarians around the world, so as to, he says, refine best practices. I'm Carla Palmer for ZNS Network News.
Well, it appears the alleged prophet looking for prophet who was supposed to speak for the next 2 weeks at local churches may have left town.
We've also learned that his next stop at a local church for revival services there have been canceled. And while the reports continue to pour in, our Clint Watson has this follow-up.
Barbadian prophet L.L. Spencer has left the country. Since this story broke, ZNS newsroom has been flooded with calls of alleged victims angry that they were taken advantage of. Nelson Brennan was one of them. His encounter began after his wife persuaded him to accompany her to one of the revival services. That night, she was singled out by the prophet.
I want to pray for you, but say, I want you to bring me $4,000 in the morning. Wow. So he said, how much for a coffin? He said, I know a coffin costs more than $4,000.
While police can't really intervene as the financial gifts to the prophet were voluntary, despite any alleged coercion, Director of Immigration William Pratt, who is out of the country, spoke to ZNS News by phone, clarifying what transpired.
Reverend Dr. Sheldon Higgs and Reverend Dr. Philip Markfield visited my office requesting that they be allowed to continue additional 2 weeks of service, 1 week at Lively Hope Baptist Church and another week at Calvary Baptist Church. And I've granted them permission.
Pratt also confirmed that the prophet was not conducting his prior revival services on his own, as the immigration department would not permit that. In fact, that's where Baptist clergyman Reverend Dr. Philip McPhee clarified was the extent of his involvement outside of the prophet visiting his church on Sunday and bringing a brief word out of courtesy.
The director said that if they're here, they have to have a covering. I said to them, if they need a covering, I wouldn't mind being a covering for them if they are doing God's work. I have no problem, and Dr. Higgs said the same thing. But I said to them, look, as far as I know, I really didn't know them like that. And so I went on that assumption, basically because of their name as a prophet of God.
Reverend Shelton Higgs of New Lively Hope Church also confirmed the prophet spoke at his church from Sunday to Tuesday. In his defense, he maintains that Spencer is an excellent preacher and a man of God. He says people were blessed. President of the Bahamas Christian Council, Reverend Ranford Patterson, revealed they have an arrangement in place to work with the Department of Immigration to review applications of evangelists seeking to come to the Bahamas. However, he maintains if they come through a church or as a visitor on vacation, they may not be notified. While he believes they must work closer with government, he admonishes parishioners to think twice.
I have a serious problem with Bahamians who will flock to an international person from overseas coming to the Bahamas. They'll flock, they'll pack the churches, they'll give their lunch money, their mortgage, their rent, their light. They give everything to these people. These people are going to get on the plane the next day. But we who are here, we have to be here to support them. We have to be here to ensure that their children have food to eat, that their lights are on, their mortgage, their rents are paid. We are here and we're doing this every day. But they don't have the same level of appreciation for those of us who are on the ground. And I have a serious problem with that. And sometimes I don't feel sorry for Bahamians who allow themselves to be taken in.
Meantime, pastors feel as though there is a hidden motive and agenda behind all of this ordeal, and in due time, due season, they feel it'll be revealed. Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.
In other news tonight, the Mike Howell Member of Parliament, V. Alfred Gray, calling on the Commissioner of Police to investigate a possible scam on Bay Street involving police officers, and tow truck drivers.
The Agriculture Minister also called out 2 police stations in particular for having the most discourteous officers stationed there. Shanique Miller has more.
He was speaking to a bill that calls for environment laws to be enforced, but Mike Howell MP V. Alfred Gray says that enforcement needs to be expanded all the way to the police force. In fact, Gray called attention to something he described as a racket on Bay Street, and he believes the police are at the center of it.
It just seemed to me that it's a money thing. Once we start to look at it or touch it, you got to pay to get it. And they seem to have the support of the law enforcement officers in many cases in that kind of situation. And I don't think it's right. I just think it's wrong. And if it's a scam, I invite them to stop it.
With the Minister of National Security sitting nearby, Gray continued to explain just how unsuspecting Bahamians are victims of this alleged operation on Bay Street.
This lady came out of her car, and Mr. Speaker, I was walking, and I am sure she was not out of her car for more than 3 or 4 minutes. And she was not obstructing anything. She might not have parked in a proper parking place, but certainly she was not obstructing. And it seemed to me that the wrecker driver was like watching her. And before she could go in, and she said, "That's my vehicle, I'm going to move it." And the man just started to put his thing, whatever they put under the car, and he started to kind of wrench it up. And the woman said, "Sir, could you please just let me move my car?" And she had to pay $60 for him to put it down. Mr. Speaker, that to me is reckless. That to me is not necessary just to make a dollar. And that's why I say sometimes, Mr. Speaker, I believe it's a scam.
Shanique Miller, ZNS Network News.
In other news from Parliament, House members wrapped up debate on the Derelict Vehicles Amendment Bill yesterday afternoon. The Member of Parliament for North Abaco, Renard Curry, called for more educational campaigns so members of the public can understand what violating the new laws will really mean.
And I see this bill now is seeking to now bring some form of accountability to those persons. It's going to up the fee from $80, as it was in the past, to $500. One of the things I would like to see also is the public really being sensitized to what is happening with this bill. Many of our people don't follow what is happening as far as the newspaper, reading the newspaper, finding out what is the change in legislation, what have you. So they may not be aware of this, so it'd be good to have a public education campaign. And this can be done at the lower levels of townships to ensure that communities understand the impact this would have upon them once this legislation is enforced.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Works with responsibility for BEC, Philip Davis, updating the nation on the status of the energy partner for the Bahamas Electricity Corporation. The government's goal is to find a working partner for the country's main energy supplier that could help BEC reduce its reliance on costly oil imports, develop alternative sources of power generation, and improve the overall efficiency of the company. Davis says it's a timely process that's nearing a completion.
The negotiations have been completed. The advisors, KPMG, has made some recommendations to the government and given the government the assessment of all the bidders that complied or submitted the proposals. That is now before Cabinet, and we will be looking and considering those options within the next week or two.
When asked about the proposed May 2014 deadline to get the deal done, the Works Minister says he can't rule it out, but he did stress that at the end of the day, the government is leaving nothing up to chance.
It's a complicated exercise, and it is taking a bit longer than we anticipated because our advisors are ensuring that all the bases are touched and all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed. So it may be quick as well as it may be long. But we have to ensure we get the best deal for the Bahamian people at the end of the day. And so if it takes longer to get that better deal, then longer it will be.
Finance State Minister Michael Halkida says government is fulfilling its promise of turning this country's economy around with 3% growth projected by year's end.
State Minister Halkida says the proof is evident as government has entered into and seen the completion of a number of agreements. As of late, the Memories Resort in Grand Bahama.
He says despite what critics may say, since his government took office, the economy has grown tremendously, and government plans to grow it even more by improving on tax collection across the board, as well as the inevitable introduction of value-added tax.
Our mission is to make sure that we extract the maximum benefit from that growth that we'll be experiencing. For example, we expect this year the economy to grow by just under 3%. Not a lot of growth, but nonetheless positive, and so it's up to us to make sure that our people are ready to take advantage of the opportunities that growth will provide.
Still to come, the shocking story of money in a murder trial.
And we've got highlights from the primary school track meet. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This segment of the news is brought to you by Shell Quality Fuels.